My key didn't fit. I was standing on the porch of the house I'd owned for a decade, a home my wife, Evelyn, was supposed to be looking after while I was away for work. A knot of pure, cold dread tightened in my stomach. I jiggled the key again, but I knew it was useless. This was my key. This was my lock. But something was profoundly wrong. I pulled out my phone, my thumb shaking as I found her name. She picked up on the second ring. Before I could even get a word out, her voice, flat and distant, cut through the phone. "It's not your house anymore." My brain couldn't quite catch up. It was just noise. Then the ground fell out from under me. "What are you talking about, Evelyn?" I asked. My own voice sounded like a stranger's. There was a short pause, and then she said the words that would launch a 2-year war. "I sold it. This is a story of how I fought back after the woman I trusted most illegally sold my home out from under me, and how I uncovered a web of lies that almost destroyed me. My name is Henry, and I'm a 42-year-old engineer. My wife, Evelyn, who's 40, and I have been married for 10 years. For a decade, she was a dedicated housewife, and we built our life in that house. It was our foundation. When I took a good-paying engineering contract 3 hours away, it was a sacrifice for a bigger goal, paying off the mortgage early. We talked every night. She told me she missed me, that she was repainting the guest room, that the dog was being a pain. Normal stuff. Or so I thought. That phone call on my own doorstep shattered my world. After she hung up, I was just paralyzed. I must have stood there for 10 minutes, staring at the door. My mind was just spinning. This had to be a mistake. A sick joke. I called a 24-hour locksmith, my heart pounding with the foolish hope that this was all just a misunderstanding over a new lock. As the locksmith was working, a car pulled into the driveway. A man and a woman got out and looked at me, confused and a little annoyed. "Can we help you?" the man asked, his hand resting on the new doorknob like he owned it. I explained it was my house, that my wife must have changed the locks as a surprise. The words tasted like ash. The woman just shook her head and pulled a stack of papers from a folder. "I think you're mistaken," she said, not unkindly. "We closed 3 weeks ago. Here's the grant deed." She handed it to me. I scanned the document, looking for the typo, the error, anything that would make it make sense. And then I saw it. Our names, the property description, and the signatures. Evelyn's was there, clear as day, and below it was mine, a frantic, ugly scribble that was a sick parody of my own handwriting. It was a forgery, a blatant, undeniable forgery. The locksmith packed up and left. The new couple, seeing the look on my face, softened their tone but stood their ground. They had a legal deed. They told me to call the police and a lawyer, but they also made it clear I had to leave. I was trespassing on my own property. I walked away from my home in a daze, with nothing but my work clothes and a bag in my hand. That night, I checked into one of those grim, roadside motels you see in movies. The bedspread smelled like stale smoke and despair. As the shock wore off, a wave of cold reality washed over me. I tried to log into our joint savings account, the one we were so proud of. Account not found. I tried our checking account. Same message. I called the bank's automated line. Both accounts were closed. The funds transferred. She had systematically and silently erased me from our life together. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there as the full weight of betrayal crashed down on me. It felt physical, like a crushing pressure on my chest. This wasn't just about a house or money. It was a total destruction of trust. Every "I love you," every shared dream was now tainted, recast as part of a long con. My past felt like a lie, and my future was a terrifying blank. The trauma was real. Waves of nausea hit me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and my mind just kept replaying her words. "It's not your house anymore." The next morning, I woke up with one single, burning thought. I would not let her get away with this. I was a victim, but I refused to be a casualty. My first call was to a law firm. I felt completely lost, explaining the situation to a paralegal, my voice cracking with a mix of anger and shame. They put me through to a lawyer named David, a calm guy who was the first anchor I'd had in 48 hours. David listened to the whole sordid story. He wasn't shocked, which was weirdly comforting. He'd seen stuff like this before. He started by explaining the legal situation in California. He told me that when someone files for divorce in California, automatic temporary restraining orders, or ATROs, immediately go into effect. These orders explicitly forbid either spouse from selling or transferring property without written permission or a court order. David suspected Evelyn had likely filed for divorce and then deliberately not served me the papers, using my absence to keep me in the dark while she pushed the sale through in violation of those orders. David's first move was fast. He went to court and filed a lease pendens. He explained it in simple terms. Lease pendens is Latin for suit pending. It's a public notice filed with the county recorder that basically puts a giant red flag on the property's title. It tells the world there's a legal dispute over who owns the house. This immediately clouds the title, making it impossible for the new owners to sell or refinance it until our case was resolved. It was the first time I felt even a flicker of control. With the property frozen, the real detective work started. We had to prove two things: that my signature was forged and that Evelyn acted with fraudulent intent. To prove the forgery, I spent days digging through old storage boxes at my parents' house, finding every document with my real signature I could. My passport, old checks, work contracts. We hired a forensic handwriting expert who compared the sloppy signature on the deed to dozens of my real ones. Her preliminary report was crystal clear. The signature on the deed was a fake. The next piece was a notarization. A deed needs a notary's stamp to be valid. David looked into the notary public, whose stamp was on a fraudulent deed. And here we hit a breakthrough. The notary was an 87-year-old man who, according to state records, had been in a full-time nursing home for 2 years with severe dementia. He was physically and mentally incapable of notarizing anything. His notary journal, the official logbook, had been reported stolen from his family's home over a year ago. Evelyn hadn't just forged my name. She had used a stolen, fraudulent notary stamp to make her crime look legitimate. This wasn't just a messy divorce. It was a felony. While the forgery case was building, David started unraveling the financial mess. He explained a legal concept called a dissipation claim. In a divorce, you can't just waste or hide marital assets. If you do, a court can force you to pay it all back. We sent subpoenas to banks, and the records painted a grim picture. The day after the sale closed, nearly $500,000 was wired from escrow into our joint account. Within hours, that money, plus our life savings, was funneled into new accounts under her name only. The paper trail was damning. We weren't just fighting for a house. We were fighting to claw back a decade of our life's work. Walking into that courtroom for the first hearing was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Evelyn sat on the other side, looking like a total stranger. No remorse in her eyes, just cold defiance. Her lawyer was ready to defend the indefensible. Their argument was as bold as the crime itself. She claimed I had given her verbal permission to sell the house, that I knew all about it. She tried to paint me as an absent, distant husband, and argued she needed the money for a new life. My lawyer, David, systematically tore her story apart. He started with a forgery, showing the expert's report with side-by-side comparisons of my signature and the fake. Then came the bombshell about the notary. When David presented evidence that the notary had been incapacitated in a nursing home for 2 years, you could feel a ripple of shock go through the room. The judge's expression went from patient to deeply concerned. The foundation of Evelyn's fraud was crumbling, but the fight wasn't over. A new problem came up: the couple who had bought the house. Their lawyer argued they were a bona fide purchaser, or BFP. It's a legal term for an innocent party who buys a property without any knowledge of fraud. They claimed they were victims too, and their right to the house should be protected. This was a nightmare. If the court sided with them, I might only be able to sue Evelyn for the money, which she had already hidden. David argued that they couldn't have been bona fide, because even a little bit of due diligence would have raised red flags. The title listed me as a co-owner. Why didn't they or their title company question why I was at the closing? Why didn't they ask for a video call or some other verification, especially since one owner was out of state? He argued that turning a blind eye isn't the same as acting in good faith. The judge, clearly troubled, issued a temporary restraining order, TRO, which blocked the new buyers from selling or changing the house while the case was ongoing. It was a small win, but the war dragged on for months, draining my money and my spirit. There were dark days I wanted to just give up. During this time, I was living in a small, rented apartment, trying to rebuild my life. I felt this huge sense of shame, like I'd been a fool. The betrayal was a constant weight. I had nightmares, couldn't focus at work, and didn't trust anyone. I finally took a friend's advice and started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma. She helped me understand the shame wasn't mine to carry. It wasn't my failure. It was Evelyn's deception. Slowly, with therapy and the support of my family and friends, I started to feel less like a victim and more like a survivor. I wasn't just fighting for a house, but for my own sanity. After nearly 18 months, the final trial date arrived. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the emotions boiling inside me. David's strategy was a surgical strike on the two pillars of Evelyn's crime, the fraudulent notary and the money trail. The moment of truth came when Evelyn took the stand. She started with the same story about my verbal consent, her voice practiced and steady. But under David's cross-examination, she started to crack. He was relentless but calm. "Mrs. Harris," he began, "you claim my client agreed to this sale. Can you show us a single email or text message where he says that?" She couldn't. Instead, David produced a mountain of our texts and emails from that time. Messages about our future, about renovations we'd do when I got home. The jury saw a normal marriage, not one about to be liquidated. Then, he moved to the notary. "You testified you met with a notary and my client to sign the deed. Is that correct?" "Yes," she said, her voice a little shaky. "That's interesting," David said, pacing, "because we have medical records and testimony that Mr. Peterson, the notary, has been nonverbal and confined to bed at a nursing facility for 2 years. So I ask you again, Mrs. Harris, under oath, how did you meet with a man who can't speak, write, or leave his bed?" The courtroom went dead silent. Evelyn's face went white. She stammered, looked at her lawyer, then at the ceiling. She had nothing. David pressed on, showing internet search records from her laptop for how to buy notary tools and fake notary stamps. It was over. The lie was too big. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Harris, did you forge a notary's signature and stamp on this deed?" She broke. A sob escaped her, and the whole act collapsed. Through tears, she admitted it all. She admitted to finding the notary's tools online, to forging my name, to everything. A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't joy. There was no victory in seeing the woman I once loved completely fall apart. It was just a sad, hollow feeling. The truth was out, but the betrayal was now a permanent public record. The judge delivered his ruling with stern finality. He declared the sale null and void due to the extensive fraud. He called Evelyn's actions a fraudulent conveyance, a legal term for cheating a creditor, in this case me. He voided the grant deed, erasing the transaction. The fight for the house was over. In the final judgment, David argued that just getting the house back wasn't enough. Evelyn had also liquidated our entire financial life. He asked the judge to impose a constructive trust over all the money she'd taken, a legal tool that treats a wrongdoer as someone just holding stolen funds to the rightful owner. The judge agreed completely, citing the overwhelming evidence. He ordered a full reconstitution of our marital assets. Evelyn was legally required to repay every dollar from the sale and every penny from our accounts. The court placed liens on her new bank accounts to make sure the judgment got paid. The divorce was finalized, with the court ruling for me on every single point. The house was mine. The money she stole was ordered returned. Walking back into my house was surreal. Same four walls, but everything felt different. It took a long time for it to feel like home again. The emotional scars run deeper than any financial loss. Learning to trust again, not just other people, but my own judgment, is a work in progress. Looking back, this was never about revenge. It was about standing up for myself. I learned that the legal system can work, but you need patience, resources, and a good lawyer who can guide you through the darkest times. Most importantly, I learned that I was more resilient than I ever knew. I discovered that even after your world is demolished, you can rebuild. It starts with one small act of fighting back. The house is just wood and nails, but fighting for it was symbolic. It was a fight for my dignity, my past, and my future. I got my home back, but in the process, I really got my life back. This was one of the worst experiences of my life, but it taught me a lot about resilience. If you've been through something similar, or if this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter. And if you want to see more content about navigating injustice, please consider subscribing. For the journey was long and the emotional cost was huge, but it was a fight I had to win. I got my home back. I recovered my life savings, and I closed a painful chapter with my head held high. Thank you for listening to my story.